This November, I will have been playing World of Warcraft for 20 years, which is hard to even comprehend. And while I've certainly had a bit of a love-hate relationship with it, I think I can confidently say that the War Within represents the best it's ever been. From the story, to the environments, to the music, to the new features, this is WoW firing on all cylinders. The biggest improvement philosophically is that Blizzard seems to actually want everyone to get to see the whole expansion this time around. All the juicy plot stuff used to be locked behind either joining an Endgame guild, which can be like a part-time job and we don't all have time for as adults, or queuing for pickup groups, which has always been a terrible experience. In contrast, the first time I ran through one of the War Within's follower dungeons, which let you take in the story solo at your own pace with a group of NPC helpers, I'm not playing it up to say I almost cried. As a type of player who feels like they've been left behind for decades, this is the most listened to I've ever felt. I can't overstate how much World of Warcraft is completely transformed for me now that if I see something cool on the wall of a dungeon that an artist worked really hard on, I can stop and look at it for as long as I want and I don't have to worry about 4 other people getting mad at me. I can pause and casually read through a boss's journal entry when I get to them, instead of having to spoil the entire instance before I even go in there by familiarizing myself with fights I haven't even seen yet. If I do want to eventually run with other people, which I generally do, I can practice these fights on my own as many times as I want without ever getting yelled at or wasting someone else's time. I can get up in the middle of a dungeon to make a sandwich. I'm living every hunter's dream, pulling each trash group when I feel like it and knowing the tank will happily just go along with whatever I want and make it work. Because she's not real. I'm the main character, also Azeroth's favorite princess and the most interesting girl in the world. This is, simply put, a vastly more enjoyable way to play a video game for me. And it might be the biggest step WoW has taken forward design-wise in the 2 decades I've been playing it. The blatant catering to my playstyle continues with Delves, the excellent new solo dungeons that are meant to be something of an alternative to raids and Mythic Plus in the endgame. Being geared for solo content allows them to experiment with dungeon design in ways that simply wouldn't work in a 5-person experience. One delve has what are effectively the jump mushrooms from Sonic the Hedgehog, allowing you to explore vertically in a new way. And another featured a portable flamethrower that allowed me to burn away pesky Nerubian webs, and also increase my DPS. And they get really satisfyingly hard at the highest tiers too, though I think certain mechanics like unavoidable AoEs that can one-shot cloth and leather wearers are a bit annoying since they're purely a gear check and don't care about player skill. At least this is how it all works in theory. As I'm writing this, there's a major issue with scaling in higher level delves that's making them impossible to complete for some players. And this is only one of many bugs and tuning issues I've encountered.
Don't go dying on me!
Unfortunately, this isn't a highly polished endgame experience. From missing voice lines in certain cutscenes to max level world quests with spawn rates so low, they have flocks of players circling the area on flying mounts like condors and rushing in to fight over one objective. There's a lot that feels like it could have used more testing once you hit 80. Some or all of this may be resolved by the time you're watching this, even if it's just because there are fewer players trying to do all of this content, but I think it's important to point out that the state it was in around launch was a little disappointing. There's nothing disappointing about the zones, though. The first of them, the verdant and picturesque Isle of Dorn, feels very familiar to a longtime WoW player in a lot of the same ways the Dragon Isles did. And basically all of the best features from Dragonflight are back. You get skyriding, what used to be called dragon riding, almost immediately, which I'm still a little conflicted about just because I think exploring new zones for the first time on the ground gives you more of a sense of place and grandeur. But I'm not conflicted at all about the return of thrilling aerial race courses and the fantastic expanded profession system. The real showstopper is Hallowfall. I know people throw around poetic wording like breathtaking a lot, but what I want you to understand is when I saw this zone for the first time, I actually stopped breathing for a couple seconds. It might be the most unique, awe-inspiring area Blizzard has ever designed, with a complete underground sea stretching out into the misty depths, beneath a colossal crystal embedded in the cavern's ceiling that serves as a subterranean sun. Going even further down the rabbit hole, Aj-Kahet, the seat of Nerubian power, is like a whole other capital city, and the game board for a fascinating spy thriller power struggle that evokes some of the best parts of Suramar from Legion. And the music! I can easily say The War Within has some of my favorite music in WoW since, dang, Wrath of the Lich King maybe? Since Blizzard's composers always kill it with their orchestral excellence, it's really something when they release this many tracks that stand out even by their high standards. Just like Dragonflight, these smaller zone quests are often memorable and touching. I think the one everyone's going to be talking about this time involves one of the semi-immortal Earthen realizing his mind is starting to deteriorate, and asking you to help him set his affairs in order as he plans to end his own life instead of undergoing a hard reset to continue his duties without any of his prior memories. I never get tired of being reminded that for all the world-shaking high fantasy shenanigans driving World of Warcraft at the plot level, these kinds of heartfelt and relatable tales are what actually make it special. As far as the plot is concerned, there have been plenty of exciting and significant moments already. I was worried about Ilaria Windrunner, who has been one of my favorites since she first appeared in Warcraft 2. The whole edgelord vengeance thing has been done so many times before, but I was pleasantly surprised to see that the writers have made her very much her own person, and chosen to highlight what makes her different from her sister Sylvanas instead of retreading tired tropes. As much as I adore the new solo content, the group stuff is pretty strong this time around too. The 5-man dungeons overall are a step up from Dragonflight. There are a couple duds. The Rookery is about as simplistic as modern WoW dungeons get, though to be fair, it is also the intro dungeon. Meanwhile, the Dawnbreaker is like a swashbuckling action movie that has you flying between different airships, and while I think it's a bit janky in execution, I would always prefer them to try new stuff like this, even if they don't stick the landing.
Head to the next ship and defeat the crew.
Then you have some that hit just the right spot. Cinderbrew Meadery has a hilarious fight that requires your group to serve drinks to angry patrons, or they'll pound on the tables harder and harder to deal AoE damage to the whole group. The raid, Nerubar Palace, is a satisfying capstone to the Queen Ansarek storyline, with some tricky but not overly annoying bosses. The vibes and area design are creepy and epic. And even on Raid Finder, the encounters don't feel like a totally mindless DPS race. I also really like the pacing of the Endgame season so far. It feels like there's just enough for me to do without ever feeling like I have to put in dozens of hours a week to maximize my progression. You can eventually gear up to roughly heroic raider item levels just doing delves, which is much more generous than I was expecting. And the refresh rate on daily quests means that if you want to log in once a day, you can clean up your map in about 20 minutes. The War Within is the best World of Warcraft has been on all fronts in many years, and possibly ever. When returning franchise creative director Chris Metzen got on stage at the last BlizzCon and said it was time to come home, he really wasn't just stringing us along. The writing is strong, the gameplay is strong, the music and zone design are exceptional even by Blizzard standards. The endgame loop feels good and offers tons of satisfying ways to progress, including more appropriately difficult and rewarding solo content than ever. The level 80 experience has some wonky tuning and annoying bugs, but I trust Blizzard to get that ironed out eventually. Somehow, this 2-decade-old MMO feels fresh and thrilling again. Be sure to check out the written version of my review on IGN.com, which includes so many additional thoughts that it's more than twice the length of this video, including some in-depth class design criticism. Or for some other video reviews, you can see what we think of Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 and Star Wars Outlaws. And for everything else, stick with IGN.